Red dust blanketed the narrow trail as Elias Creed pulled back on the reins and brought his horse to a stop. He spent his entire fortune to buy this land. On paper, just an abandoned ranch, promising a quiet new beginning, far from the chaos of the world. But what lay before him stole the breath from his lungs. Right there in the yard, beneath a weather-beaten wooden frame, a giant of a girl was hanging by the neck. Her tall, powerful frame swayed weakly in the evening breeze, long legs kicking in exhausted panic. The rope dug deep into her neck, leaving angry purple-red welts, the wheezing, ragged gasps escaping her throat, barely louder than wind through cracked walls were the only signs life had not yet given up. Elias gripped the reins tighter, his calloused hands trembling. He had seen death before too many times, too close. But this was different. Not the fury of battle, but the quiet cruelty of one human being toward another too powerless to fight back. The sunset bathed everything in gold, the brittle grass, the abandoned ranch, and the girl's bruised and fading face. And in her wide, pain-filled eyes, Elias saw something strange. Fear, desperation, and a silent plea. He stepped down from his saddle. His hand, almost by instinct, touched the handle of the dagger at his belt. With the wind howling through the prairie, Elias knew he had only seconds to decide. Would he turn away, like so many before him? Or would he cut the rope and walk straight into a story he already knew would come at a price? Now let me ask you, if you stood there in Elias's boots, what would you do? Would you save the girl, or let fate decide her end? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I would really like to know. The blade cut clean through the rope. Her heavy body dropped to the ground with a thud, kicking up a thick cloud of red dust. Elias dropped to his knees, rough hands sliding beneath her head to steady it. Her skin was burning hot, each breath coming in short, broken gasps. He pressed his hand to her neck, found a faint, faltering pulse. Still alive. Come on now, do not give up, Elias muttered, not sure if he was speaking to her or to himself. After a few gulps of water from his canteen, she let out a faint moan. Her eyelids fluttered, heavy and slow, before opening to reveal two wide, strange eyes, a pale, stormy gray-blue, filled with tears and panic. Her lips moved, and out came a fractured whisper. Cain, sold me, left me. Then she passed out again. The name hit Elias like a blade to the gut. Samuel Cain, that was the man who sold him this land just a few weeks back. The price had seemed too good, the deal rushed and full of nervous urgency. Elias remembered Cain pressing him. You taking it or not, sign it now. This offer will not come again. Now he knew why. Cain had not just sold him a piece of land. He had sold him a buried horror, left hanging in plain sight. Elias sat back in the dry dirt, his eyes scanning the ranch. The sagging wooden house, the broken fence, the well nearly dry. It all looked abandoned, but there were signs. A freshly painted door, rows of soil half-tilled, scattered straw still fresh in the livestock pens. Someone had lived here recently, at least until the noose was tightened around the neck of the giant girl. Elias clenched his jaw. Years of war had taught him this. Every piece of western soil was soaked in blood, and those who came last often paid the price left behind by those who came first. He had come here looking for peace, a place to put the fighting behind him. But this land had welcomed him with a rope and a dying soul. He looked at the girl again. Her towering frame might scare a man at first glance, but her face was young, almost childlike, like someone who had never known what it was to live a normal life. The bruises on her neck, the scratches on her arms, they told the story of torment, of being treated like less than human, labeled a monster, strung up like some beast to be made an example of. A gust of wind rushed past, and the front door's hinges creaked, like the land itself was groaning. Elias took a breath, bent down, and lifted her up onto his shoulder. He had carried fallen comrades off bloody battlefields. Now he carried a life society had hanged and left behind. He stepped over the rotting porch boards and pushed open the cabin door. The scent of old smoke and aged timber hit him square in the chest. He laid her down on a torn mattress in the corner, then shut the door behind them. Outside, the western sun was fading, coating the hanging frame in a blood-red hue. Elias knew, clear as day. From the moment he cut that rope, he was no longer just a passerby. He had stepped straight into the story Samuel Cain left behind. A story bound to hold more blood and more sorrow. But maybe, just maybe, a story that might give him something he thought he had lost for good. A reason to keep on living. The flickering oil lamp cast a dull yellow glow across the cracked wooden walls. Elias sat quietly at the edge of the bed, his eyes fixed on the trembling body, breathing in shallow, uneven rhythms. He had wrapped a strip of cloth ripped from his own shirt around the bruises on her neck, and placed a bowl of water and some dry bread by her side. After a while, her heavy eyelids fluttered. Her breath came quick and shallow. Then those strange gray-blue eyes opened, not with rage or violence, but the look of someone who had just clawed her way back from death's door. Elias gave a small nod, his voice low and steady. "You are alive. That is what matters." She swallowed hard, her throat dry and cracked. Why did you save me?" Elias shrugged, his gaze steady. "Because I have seen too many left behind, and I swore not to let it happen again." She said nothing, her eyes filled with something uncertain, part suspicion, part gratitude. Then her lips trembled, and words spilled out. "Him, Samuel Kane, he is the one who hanged me." The name made Elias grit his teeth. He remembered Kane pushing papers across the table, fast-talking, rushing the deal. Samuel Kane, the man who had sold him this land. "Why?" Elias asked, voice rough. The girl bit her lip. Her massive shoulders shook. "I worked for him, plowed the fields, built his fences, fought off raiders. I did everything, but then he got into debt. When the collectors came, he offered me up to pay his way out. Said I was a monster, left me there tied up to hang, a warning to anyone who dared stand in his path." Her voice cracked, but every word hit Elias like a blade. He had spent every coin he had buying this land, thinking he was buying peace, only to walk straight into a pit of betrayal. He looked at her face still smudged with dust and dried blood, eyes heavy with the sting of being used, then thrown away. Not a beast, just a person, discarded like trash. "What is your name?" Elias asked quietly. "Mara," she whispered. "My mother gave me that name, but most folks, they just called me the monster." In the silence of that small room, Elias clenched his fists. He understood now. If Mara had survived because of him, then from this moment forward, he was no longer alone. But it also meant that his own rope was now tied to the deep hole Samuel Kane had left behind. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. Somewhere far off, a dog howled in the night. Elias turned toward the window, and there, in the distance, he saw lights, faint flickers of lanterns swaying in the dark, moving slowly down the village road. He knew right away. It would not be long before the ones who strung Mara up came back. And this time, they would not be coming for her alone. The sound of hooves echoed from afar, steady and deliberate, like war drums. Elias snuffed out the oil lamp, and darkness swallowed the room whole. He tilted his head, listening. Each step, each creak of saddle leather, spoke of confidence, the kind of slow approach used by men who were sure their prey had nowhere to run. Mara lay motionless on the bed, her eyes wide with terror. Her chest heaved, breath coming in panicked bursts. Elias placed a rough hand on her shoulder, whispering, "Do not be afraid. I have seen this kind of thing before. We still have a chance." The front door shook with a heavy pound. A man's voice, raspy and thick with cheap tobacco, shouted out, "Elias Creed, we know you are in there, and that freak with you too. Come out now, before we burn this trash heap to the ground." Elias closed his eyes for a moment. They knew his name, which meant Kane had sold more than just land, and word had traveled faster than he thought. He unlatched the door and stepped onto the porch. The moonlight bathed the yard in cold silver. 5 men sat atop their horses in a line, pistols at their hips, hard faces. The leader, a man with a thick beard and sharp animal eyes, stepped forward. "What is it you want?" Elias asked, voice calm and cold. "What do we want?" The bearded man snorted. "Debt, Kane's debt. He promised to pay it with this land, and with that beast he kept in the barn. Now he is gone, and you're left holding the bag." Elias did not answer right away. His eyes scanned the scene, the broken gate, the patchy, dying grass, the gallows where Mara had nearly died. This land truly was the weight Kane had walked away from. "I bought this land with my own money. I have a deed signed by the territorial court. Whatever crooked deal Kane made, it has nothing to do with me." The men laughed. The bearded one spat on the ground. "Out here, court papers do not mean a damn thing. The only law that matters is whose gun speaks louder. You got 7 days, Creed. Either pay up, or get out. Leave the freak for us to deal with." He yanked the reins. The group turned and rode off, kicking up red dust that danced in the moonlight. Elias stood still, hand unconsciously tightening around the grip of his gun. He had wanted to leave war behind, but once again, blood and lead had found him. He stepped back inside. Mara was sitting up, her enormous shadow stretching across the wall. Her eyes shimmered with tears. Her voice trembled. "You see, I only bring trouble. They will kill you just like they tried to kill me." Elias looked at her for a long moment. In the dim light, she was not a monster, just a broken soul, waiting for someone to believe in her. He let out a tired breath, his voice rough. "Maybe I should walk away, but if I leave you behind, I will never sleep again." Outside, the wind howled through the gallows wood, creaking like death still circling overhead. Elias knew the next 7 days would be more than a fight for land. It would be a fight to protect the life he had just pulled back from the brink. I am truly grateful to have you here. If this story stirred memories of red dust evenings and hoofbeats echoing in your chest, then subscribe to my channel, so each day we can sit down again, and I will tell you another story from the Old West. 7 days passed like a windstorm sweeping red dust across the prairie. Elias and Mara threw themselves into the work rebuilding fences, digging irrigation ditches, planting rows of withered corn. By day, they worked under a sun that burned like fire. By night, Elias pored over debt ledgers by lamplight, while Mara quietly mended clothes, her thick, clumsy hands moving with stubborn resolve. Still, they both knew time was just a rope tightening with each passing day, and just as promised, at sunset on the 7th day, the hoofbeats returned, low and steady from the horizon. Red dust rose high, blotting out the dying sun. A gang of more than a dozen men thundered in on horseback, rifles gleaming, coils of rope slung over their shoulders. At the front rode the same bearded man from before, his cruel grin widening at the sight of Elias standing firm at the broken gate. "Creed," he bellowed, "time's up. The land and that monster belong to us now." Elias did not reply. He simply raised his Winchester, the black barrel catching the last light of dusk. Mara stepped forward behind him, towering like a mountain, the bruises on her neck still visible, but her eyes burned with fire. They laughed. "You plan to stand against all of us?" The bearded man sneered. An old man past his prime and a half-dead freak. No one answered. The first shot cracked like thunder. Elias squeezed the trigger. The bullet struck the dirt inches from a horse's hoof, sending dust flying. The horse reared and screamed. The gang scattered. Chows erupted. Gunfire tore through the air. Sparks and smoke lit the ranch yard like a storm. Elias crouched behind the wooden fence, firing with deadly precision. Years of war had made him cold, steady, unshakable. Mara let out a roar deep and guttural. She charged forward, grabbing a man mid-swing. With brute force, she lifted him like a sack of grain and slammed him into the ground. He did not rise. 2 more tried to lasso her, ropes flying. She snarled, yanked back, and flung them both into the dirt. Then she grabbed a post from the gallows, tore it loose, and swung it wide, clearing 3 men in a single strike. Screams, gunfire, and panicked horses filled the air, turning the ranch into a hell of dust and rage. Elias reloaded, hands trembling with fury but eyes cold as stone. Every shot dropped another man who dared get close. At last, only the bearded leader remained. He crouched behind a saddle, eyes darting. Elias stepped forward, rifle aimed, but Mara was faster. She seized him by the collar and lifted him off the ground. Her eyes blazing, he shrieked, legs flailing in terror. "Do not," Elias shouted, stepping in, gun still raised. "If we kill him, we are no better than they are." Mara panted, knuckles white around the man's shirt, her eyes filled with tears, not from rage, but from years of humiliation finally boiling over. The yard fell silent. After a long pause, she let him drop. He collapsed like a sack of rotted hay. Elias turned to him, rifle still steady. "Run. Tell the rest. If you come back, this land will be your grave." The bearded man scrambled onto his horse and fled. The others not far behind. Silence returned to the ranch, broken only by the wind, the scent of gunpowder, and the 2 figures left standing. A battle-worn soldier and a towering girl who refused to be broken. They had won, but Elias knew this was only the beginning. The beginning of a long fight to hold this land, to protect the life he had saved, and to nurture the fragile trust now blooming between 2 outcasts who had found each other. That night, the ranch yard reeked of gunpowder and blood. A small fire crackled inside the old fireplace, casting flickering shadows across Elias's worn face and the towering figure of Mara, curled in the corner of the room. Outside, the wind still howled through the broken fence, but for the first time in weeks, there was human warmth inside the house. Elias picked up the debt ledger the men had left behind, flipping through the pages beneath the dim oil lamp. The numbers ran long, stacking into a mountain of debt, enough to wipe out an entire family. His brow furrowed. His lips tightened. He borrowed it all. In your name. And on this land. Mara said nothing. Her wide hands clenched the edge of her shirt as if trying to tear the memory from her skin. Her voice came rough. All I knew was how to plow. Planquerne. Stand guard at night. He said I was his. I thought that meant loyalty. Turns out, it was just a chain. Oh. Elias looked at her for a long time. And for the first time, something flickered in his tired eyes. Compassion. Keinran. But I will not. If I bought this land, then I bought the weight that came with it. But I will not carry it alone. He slapped the ledger shut and laid it firmly on the wooden table. Listen to me, Mara. We will pay this back. With work, not with lives. I will handle the numbers and the trades. You protect the land. Watch over the livestock. From now on, this is a partnership, not a burden. Mara looked up, eyes glassy with tears. You trust me? After everything? I am just a burden. Elias let out a dry, rough laugh like wood snapping in the fire. I saw you knock down 3 grown men with a rotting beam of wood. That is not a burden. That is strength. In that moment, there were no monsters, no outcasts, just 2 people sitting by the fire, sharing a fragile hope. The next day, Elias mounted his horse, taking with him the ledger and a few sacks of leftover corn. He rode to the border market, where traders, most of them cheated by Cain, gathered. He sat across from them, firm and honest. Cain ran. But I stayed. Give me time. This land will bear fruit again. I will repay every cent. His blunt honesty took them by surprise. An old trader stroked his silver beard and gave a slow nod. Creed, I do not trust many men, but I trust the eyes of someone who has seen war. You have 3 months. Fail, and the land is mine. Elias returned at sunset, worn thin but clear in purpose. He told Mara everything. She stood still for a moment, then bowed her head. 3 months. Then we will make this land bloom again. He promised. Together, they looked out across the dry, cracked fields, and in the deep red glow of the setting sun, they saw something small, a new chance. Fragile, faint, but enough to hold on to, enough to begin a journey, to reclaim what was lost, with sweat and with blood. 3 months passed. The harsh west still howled with wind and red dust, but the land of Elias and Mara had changed. Rows of young corn stretched green across the field. The fence lines stood straight and strong. Cattle bellowed with life from rebuilt pens. Fresh water trickled through the irrigation ditches, like blood returning to an old heart. Each morning, Elias rose before sunrise. He planned the crops, rode to town with goods for trade, and set aside every hard-earned coin to chip away at the debt Cain had left behind. And every night, no matter how bone-tired he was, he sat by the fire, adjusting the ledgers, his weathered face lit by flame, eyes wrinkled deep, but full of purpose. Mara worked tirelessly. With her unnatural strength, she carried timber 3 grown men could not lift. She drove off wolves in the night, stood tall against prairie storms, and never once complained. Yet, her great hands were gentle too. She patched Elias's shirts, picked wildflowers for the chipped clay vase, and from time to time, she laughed. A pure, childlike laugh, as if no one had ever called her a monster. One evening, as Elias returned from market with a small pouch of coin, he found Mara standing in the cornfield. Her face flushed in the sunset's glow. She turned, holding up a bundle of freshly picked corn, her eyes shining with the pride of a child showing off a hard-won prize. Elias laughed out loud, a sound he thought he had buried with the war. That night, they sat on the porch. Elias slowly poured 2 cups of black coffee, his voice low and steady. 3 months ago, I thought I had bought a trap. Turns out, I found a home. Mara froze for a second. Then, her wide, tear-filled eyes softened. She placed her broad hand gently over his, and whispered, "You believed in me, when the whole world left me hanging. I will never forget that." They sat in silence. No more words were needed. Only the wind across the field, the quiet chirp of crickets, and a peace they had not known in years. The debt was not gone. The danger could return. But Elias understood. He had found something war had never given him. A reason to live. And Mara, once mocked and hung like a monster, was now called by her name. Seen, not with fear, but with respect. In the West, justice was often tied to the end of a rope, but sometimes it was a pair of scarred hands that reached up, cut the rope, and gave someone a second chance at life. A blazing dawn stretched across the prairie. Golden light spilled over the roof of the old wooden cabin, where thin wisps of smoke rose from the chimney. Acquiesce déclaration. This place had come back to life. Elias Creed sat on the porch, a steaming cup of coffee in his hand. His cold, gray eyes now carried more lines than ever, but behind them glowed a warmth that had never been there before. Out in the yard, Mara laughed as a group of calves ran clumsily around her feet. That laugh, loud and pure, drowned out every shadow ever cast by the name Monster. Today, she was no longer the woman who once hung from a gallows. She was alive, strong, and home. Elias remembered that first evening when he arrived. The gallows had swayed in the wind, a giant figure hanging, barely clinging to life, and he had stood at a crossroads, to walk away or cut the rope. Back then, he never imagined that one choice would change everything, that it would not only save a life, but free his own, from loneliness, from the ghosts of war. In 3 short months, they had plowed the land together, fought off debt collectors, rebuilt the ranch from the ground up. What Cain had left behind like a trap, they had turned into a home. The debt ledger, once thick and suffocating, now only half remained. And Elias believed, someday, they would erase it completely. But even now, with that weight still on their backs, he had seen enough to know they could endure anything, so long as they stood together. Mara looked up and caught Elias's gaze. In her eyes, there was no more doubt, only respect, and something gentler, like glowing coals beneath the ashes. She walked to him and placed her wide, warm hand on his shoulder. "We survived, Elias," she said softly, "and we will keep going." He nodded. "Yes, we turned a noose into a bond." Beyond them, the prairie stretched wide and endless. The wind carried the scent of young corn and firewood, replacing the smell of blood and gunpowder from days gone by. Elias knew the West would always be harsh, that someday others might come calling for blood. But now, he was not alone. And Mara, once called a monster, had become his faith, his strength, and his reason to keep on living. Out in the Wild West, the law often lived on paper, and justice swung from a rope. But sometimes, true justice came from one soul brave enough to cut that rope. If the story of Elias and Mara touched your heart, we would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to the channel to hear more heartfelt Western stories. Stories where lost souls find one another in the dust and wind. And if you can, share this video, because sometimes, all it takes is one moment of courage to save an entire life.